Welcome to the Building a Better You podcast, presented by the Garner Chamber of Commerce Young Professionals. I'm Nick Spindler with Community of Hope Ministries.
And I'm Chris Morgan with Grow Local Realty.
The goal of this podcast is to help young professionals develop and grow into successful business people in their communities.
In each episode, we will talk with local business leaders to provide strategies and tips to help our listeners.
So let's dive right in.
Welcome back to the Building a Better You podcast. We are here this week with Eric O'Brien. He is with Raleigh Oaks Behavioral Health. We were supposed to have Sharday Edwards with us, but unfortunately she got stuck at work and couldn't make it, so hopefully we'll get her on here soon. But Eric, could you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. So I am the Director of Business Development for Raleigh Oaks Behavioral Health Hospital. And my job is to mainly be in the community and make connections with other referral sources, folks that are dealing with people during mental health crises that are looking for placement options. So we have a list of resources for those that are seeking lower levels of service. We are just an inpatient stabilization hospital, but I build those and nurture those relationships in the community with those people, mostly hospitals, that are trying to make placements for facilities like ours.
That's awesome. And so we were really interested in having you and Sharday on because mental health the crisis is just exploding right now.
Absolutely.
It feels like, and is just something that is so critical, but also can be ignored or tough to talk about. And so we want to invite you on just to kind of tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and tell us a little bit about resources that might be out there for people that could be struggling. You know, the past few years have been incredibly tough on everyone, I think we could say. And so what are some of the trends that you're seeing right now in the mental health community?
Well, I think the most concerning part of the trends is that it's not new, right? Mental health has always been an issue, but the rate at which the need for mental health services for inpatient or even outpatient services, it's rapid. It's rapidly increasing. And then we look at 2019, we look at 2020, and what happened with COVID. The issues of people not having access to mental health services, not being able to see their outpatient psychiatrist or access to just that level of support that they're used to on a regular basis was very challenging. I think the telehealth services that were made available to a lot of folks with the expansion of telehealth services during COVID was great, and there's some concern about that not being permanent, about the funding for that not being permanent, which is a shame because it's opened it up to a lot of rural areas in which folks didn't have access to those levels of resources before. Ultimately, the most concerning trends that I think from my perspective are child and adolescent trends, which I think I can't say the number of years, but it's been an upward trajectory for a number of years, the rate at which child and adolescents are requiring higher levels of behavioral health stabilization services. So that's the biggest concern, is when is that going to be normalized? When is that going to stop on the upward trajectory?
So you mentioned the telehealth kind of being one of the bright spots. Are there any other maybe bright spots or new things that kind of, as we dealt with COVID and need to figure out different things to do, that might have been developed or that you see?
Unfortunately not. I mean, that was kind of born out of the need to connect people with those resources during COVID. There's a lot of people trying to integrate, which I think is fantastic. They're trying to integrate technology to a greater degree in behavioral health care, which kind of pigtails off that same telehealth services, right? It connects people the same way. So having that ability to use technology to kind of improve the level of care, improve the level of access across large distances to not just metropolitan areas like Raleigh, but expand out to further rural areas that don't have those resources at all. But for our hospital alone, I was very excited when I started about a month ago, the first time that I saw the level of technology that our hospital was implementing for just patient care. A lot of times there's still some facilities in the market that don't use like electronic medical records.
Wow.
Right, you think everything you're doing is paper and pencil, and you've got these big binders. It's challenging for the staff that are working that way. But Raleigh Oaks has these sensors that follow on, that were attached to the patient, And in order to document where that patient was, what they were doing during that time, that person who's taking the rounds, the notes on what that person's doing, you have to be in proximity to that patient in order to even record those rounds. So that makes sure that there's integrity in between where the patient was and what the staff members were recording. Yeah. That alone was a big obstacle, because a lot of the times documentation of actually what a patient's doing, what a patient's feeling, where they were during their treatment, that's a time-consuming, tedious part of it. But making sure that you have verifiable, valid rounds that show exactly what the patient was doing, where they were, that adds a level of credibility to the documentation for everybody, for the case managers, for everybody that's working inside the hospitals, and then the aftercare providers and the insurance.
It's crazy to know how technology plays such a big role in that industry too, because I would have never guessed that somebody was still doing pencil and paper.
Yeah, I mean, electronic medical records, they've been around for so long, and there was a push by the federal government to make that mandatory, but there's time. They're giving everybody time in order to catch up to speed, because there's a lot of new companies that are coming out with different EHRs, that are electronic health records, that it takes a while to really find. If you've got a big network of hospitals, you really have to find the right one that's going to integrate with all of them. So you don't want to make a decision and invest in a platform that's not going to work for everybody. So
Right.
The next thing, something's new is going to come out, and you're like, oh, I just got on with this.
Thinking through that, there's people have all kinds of thoughts and feelings, and especially for the past few years, there's a lot of things that people probably felt like they were fine, and now are like, I don't really know how I'm doing. What are some things that you could recommend, tips or services or whatever, if someone's kind of feeling like, I don't really know how I'm feeling? What are some things that people could do to help themselves?
Well, I think there's a lot of great apps too. I mean, we on that same note of technologies and integration into daily lives, there's a lot of apps for mindfulness, which is one of the components of DBT therapy. So it keeps you focused on yourself and what you're experiencing in the moment. But using these cell phones that are always with us and always in our hands, there's a lot of apps that will specifically help you be more mindful of what your own behavior or what you're experiencing. I think that's step one, because a lot of people just kind of walk through life and they experience these stresses, these moments of anxiety, this intense depression, and they just they get stuck and they feel like that's just how things are, and they get used to experiencing like that. But there's a lot of, and not just technological components, but once you realize that you're experiencing things like that, there are a lot of professionals out there that are able to provide that level of care. And with telehealth services, with just regular clinical therapy that can be done over the computer, over the phone, anything along those lines, there's opportunities out there to fit into your life, regardless of where you're living, regardless of what you're experiencing in your life. There's folks that you can connect with to receive even those lower levels of services that people just need on a daily basis.
Yeah. So if you were someone and you're thinking like, hey, I feel like I might need to talk to somebody about something, how would you even start that process? What would you recommend?
Well, I'm lucky. I'm pretty well connected into the behavioral health, mental health field. I think what I would do, I would talk to family and friends first off, and I'd see. I think the funny thing is that there's more people involved in therapy than a lot of folks realize. Right? It's not something that everybody likes to talk about. It still has a unfortunate stigma associated with it, but because there's so many other opportunities now to receive services one direction or another. Talk to friends, get a connection as to who they've used or who they know of that have worked. There's a lot of, you look at Facebook and LinkedIn and things like that, and there's a lot of advertisements there they'll give you a free, initial experience with a clinician. You can decide whether you want to continue or not. But if it's serious, when it's a really serious concerning feeling, facilities like ours will provide a free level of care assessment. So if somebody calls us and says, I'm really depressed. I've been dealing with a lot lately, and it's really hard for me to focus on anything else. I'm having some scary thoughts. I don't know what to do. They'll schedule an inpatient assessment. So they'll come in and they'll do a level of care assessment, and they'll meet with a clinician. The clinician will go through a list of questions and say, at the end of the analysis, they'll say, this is what level of therapy or level of treatment I think you'd be appropriate for. We only provide inpatient stabilization services, so those are the folks that are an immediate risk to themselves or somebody else. For those folks that are requiring a lower level of care, we've got a whole list of opportunities that we can connect them with that would provide that appropriate level of care to them.
Is that sorry, Nick, but is that something that sets you guys apart from other companies out there?
Thankfully, I'd say that's pretty standard. I mean,
Okay.
a lot of the facilities will provide a continuum, so they'll be able to provide you. They'll meet you where you're at, whether it's outpatient stabilization, one individual treatment therapy session per week kind of situation. There's individualized outpatient therapy or intensive outpatient treatment. There's partial hospitalization where you're there kind of half a day at the hospital, and you receive some structured environment that's supportive, and you're receiving treatment in a therapeutic environment, but then you're still returning home at the end of the day. We're at the highest level of care right now. We may in the future expand to kind of a partial hospitalization program as well to kind of meet that need. But currently we're just inpatient stabilization. So they're with us. They're usually with us somewhere between 8 to 11 days. They'll stay with us in the facility 24 hours a day and receive treatment around the clock.
Gotcha.
And I do think it's unfortunate you mentioned there is still a stigma
Absolutely.
around seeking help, therapy, or a counselor. And one thing I try to tell people a lot is if you talk to any successful business person and you ask them like, what is one thing that like you absolutely need to be successful, one of the first things they'll tell you is you need a counselor, you need a therapist, you need to have someone that you're talking to. And so, there's all these successful billionaires, millionaires out there that will tell you like you absolutely need this. But yet our society, there's still that stigma. And so hopefully we can turn that around. And that's part of the reason we wanted to have you on, is to try to do our part in changing that stigma, because we're all going to need help at some point.
Yeah.
Life is not all great. It's not all mountaintops. We're going to have valleys. And it's nice to have people that you can talk to, and also people that are just trained to help you
Absolutely.
talk through those things and process those things. We kind of talked about how, like, if you need help, what to do, but what would you recommend if you see somebody else that you think, I think they might need some help?
Well, that becomes a sticky situation because when you're working with somebody else and you're identifying that person might be an imminent risk to themselves or somebody else, that when you're at that end of the spectrum, that can become a little bit challenging. But always be open and honest with folks. I think at times like this and in times during COVID when we're all locked away, we need to make sure that we're staying in touch with everybody. Because you're not seeing them on a regular basis. You're just kind of assuming that your family, your friends, everybody's doing well. But if you're not actually seeing them eye to eye and you're not directly, with them in the room, sometimes you're disconnected. You don't feel like you really know what's going on with them. So touching base with folks on a regular basis, make sure that, everybody's doing well. It's easy to put on a kind of that air initially and try to, if you're only interacting with people on a short basis every once in a while, right, it's easy to put up that border and prevent people from really knowing what you're going through. But I think with showing just compassion and that you're there, on a consistent basis with other folks, checking in, making sure that they're doing well, you can kind of sense if something's going on with them, hopefully. And if you do, that's when you just start going down that road and finding out what it is they're experiencing and kind of learn a little bit about what they're doing, and then you make your recommendations from that.
That's good. I like that a lot because, you just never know what others are going through.
Yeah.
But when they, that little bit of, hey, I see something, I'm like, I don't know. What do I do at this moment in time? So having this conversation is really great for me because it would help me for those that I may not have kept in touch with for God knows how long. So that's really good info.
And, the funny thing that I was thinking about when we were just saying the topic of the stigma is when I look at the professionals that I've worked at several facilities, when I work at these hospitals, and I look at the people that are involved in mental health treatment, a lot of people might be concerned about interacting with mental health professionals because they don't want to be labeled crazy or needing that level of support or anything. I mean, that goes to the stigma. But I think everybody that I've honestly come into contact with, either they themselves or somebody that's really close to them has been experiencing mental health issues. And that's why people get into the field, right? They get into the field because they want to make a difference in a situation that they've seen or they've experienced in the past. They want to be that supportive person to somebody that they've either received or that they saw somebody that they loved needed at that time. And just the people that are dedicating their lives to behavioral health services, mental health services, they're the people that you really want in your lives, right?
Yeah.
You want to be able to be connected with them because they're going to be supportive and kind of connect you with what you need in your life. I think that shouldn't prevent anybody from wanting to reach out for support.
Is that your why also?
Well, my why, yeah. I mean, there is mental health needs in my family. I actually got into working with children with autism, and that was because when I was in college, my cousin was working with children with autism, and she had graduated, and she said that there were some folks that needed direct care workers to work with their children, and I became very close to that family. I'm still close to that family, and I still keep an eye on them from time to time and check in on the kids that I used to work with. But I was doing ABA therapy there, and I transitioned and changed my major. At the end of the day, I changed my major in college to start working in that, and I majored in psychology, and the doctor who I had worked under when I was doing ABA therapy reached out and said, hey, this hospital's opening up. This is up in Illinois. This hospital's opening up, and they've got an inpatient unit for children with autism. I thought you'd be perfect because you're a male, which is unfortunately rare in the field. And some of those patients are really, really intense, and they have a lot of high needs that it's typically better for bigger individuals in order to try to keep the kids safe.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the door. So I did 5 years of direct care with children with autism with really, really severe either self-injurious behaviors or aggressive behaviors towards other people, and transitioned into marketing. And I lost that connection, but I still enjoy what I do because I'm able to meet that need, scratch that itch kind of thing of still serving a purpose and connecting outside providers with services that they need, right? And kind of minimizing that time that patients have to sit in emergency rooms waiting for services.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and hats off to the people that do work in that field,
Yes.
because the things that they are helping people through, to be listening to that and taking all that in on a daily basis, it can't be always easy. It has to bear. So hats off to them for being willing to kind of step into the mess with other people on a daily basis and help them wade through it, because I know as much as they wish they could just say, oh yeah, it doesn't impact me at all. We know that can't always be the case. So thank you to all of those folks. But as we come in for a close, there's 2 questions we ask every guest. And so the first one is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice, I would say, well, the one that's always stuck with me. What's the gentleman's name? He's like a marathon runner and a Navy SEAL. David Goggins. He had a rule that was the 40% rule. When you have reached that level of feeling like you can't go any further, you've hit the end of your rope, you don't have anything left in you, ultimately, really, that's just your mind telling you that you can't do anymore, and that you've hit that only really 40% of what your potential is, and that you've got so much more to go that's really in you, you just have to really push in order to get there.
Yeah.
That always stuck with me with him for some reason.
That's good.
I love that. That's it reminds me of one of those, I don't know what I was listening to. I think it was maybe on K-Love radio station, and it was a lady who, or it might have been on Clubhouse, one of the two, but it was where a lady, she was, I guess, swimming and doing her marathon or whatnot, and she couldn't get all the way there, and she couldn't see the horizon essentially for shore. So she was like, just got out the water, got into the boat, and she was so bummed because they were just that close. So I was like, oh man, that just reminds me of that little bit. Sorry, I get sidetracked. Yeah. But that was my...
Well, you always hear people talk about getting their second wins, because you weren't really at the end,
Yeah.
It's so hard to overcome mental. I think mental's harder to overcome than physical limitations.
Absolutely. Yep. I used to do triathlons, and it would be the same thing. Like, I would get my first race I ever did. I got so in my head during the swim that I essentially did a glorified doggy paddle for most of it, and got out. It was just, I felt so tired, so embarrassed, so humiliated, and it was like, oh, am I really gonna go like bike and run the rest of this? But like I pushed through, And then the next race, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. And, like just fought that mentally and did so much better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I say we can just get in our own head sometimes.
We sure can. That is very true.
It can be really hard to fight through that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, once you feel like you can't go any further, but you force yourself to do it, and you realize the potential is in you. I always think it's really interesting that ultimately becomes like your new standard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can reach this far, so now how much further than that then I can reach? But giving up will always keep you from finding that limitation.
Yeah, that's good.
And so the second question that we like to ask is, what is one thing that you utilize every single day, whether it's in your business or personal life outside of work? What is something that you would like to share to a young professional that's watching, or of something that you utilize?
So not to take up too much time, but a couple of years ago, I decided what I'm going to do is I'm big on New Year's resolutions, right? And I was trying to find a new resolution. And a couple
Those
of
are
years
so
ago,
hard.
They're hard, but it gives you that point to reach for, right? And I always thought that was valuable, and I still trying to get my wife to do the same, and not everybody's on board, but I always like to start fresh with a new goal. And a couple of years ago, it was, all right, I'm going to give myself 365 days. I'm going to do 500 miles, a little over a mile a day. I can do it. And I think I got to like mid-January and collapsed. And was just like, this is terrible. I'm not a runner. I'm not a runner by any measure. I can't. I don't enjoy it, right? And then it got to the next year, and I felt terrible when I reflected on that 500 miles. And I'm like, I can't do that again. All right, 500 miles. This is going to be the year I'm going to do it. And I got to about mid-year, and I had like a knee injury, and the treadmill that I ran on was having issues. And I'm like, you lose that momentum, and I just couldn't come back to it. And this year I was like, you know what I'm going to do? 1,000 miles. This year I'm going to do 1,000 miles. I'm going to make sure that I can go, push myself as possibly as hard as I can. And what it forced me to do was, you can't take a break. You can't take your foot off the accelerator because you'll never come close, right? It's if I'm going to fail now, I'm going to fail, hard,
Right.
So I pushed it to 1,000 miles, and oh boy, I got a couple of months ahead of me. I got a month and a half ahead of me of some serious running, but I'm still projected to, the way I projected, 5 miles a day. I should make my 1,000 miles this year. And it wasn't until I had pushed it and gotten to that level that was just unbelievably like, you'll never make it. I still, to this day, I've run almost 800 miles already. I hate running.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy it by any measure, but it's one of those, when I have that goal ahead of me, I know I have to do 5 miles tonight. When I have that goal ahead of me and I knock it out, afterwards, I feel good.
Yeah.
And it's by no measure is it a runner's high. It is I had a goal, I set my goal, I accomplished that little piece of incremental growth that I was looking for today, and I've achieved it. And then the next day, everything feels a little better until it gets around, evening time, and I have to do my run again. I feel good.
Yes.
But that's the one thing that keeps me going every day is I know what my goals are. It's incremental growth, and it's the big kind of the prize at the end of the rainbow. At the end of the year, I'm going to have a big old celebration. I'll probably never have a goal like this again. I'll pick something that's more palatable.
So from what I'm hearing is in the same year, you have not just ran 500 miles, but you are going to exceed and run 1,000 miles.
Right. So I've beaten those that I couldn't do in the past, and it was because I set my goal so much higher than what I was expecting to do. When you have a reasonable goal, and I thought, 500 miles, reasonable goal. It's easy to quit because it's reasonable, right? But when it's a real challenge and you challenge yourself, you put so much effort and so much time into it, and it's like I can't turn back now.
At this point, you're 800 miles.
Yeah, that's what I was like. They have to get to 1,000.
Right. That was the thought process, and so far it looks like it's going to work. So I'm kind of curious. I'll be thinking for the next month and a half or so, what I want to do for January 1st, and what do I want to set my goal for next year. But
we should do that, Nick. Do you want to do let's run 1,000 miles?
Triathlon?
Nope, I don't want to run 1,000. That was the part I hated the most.
Right.
I was like, why can't we do the running first? Like, I just want to get that out of the. Why does it have to be last? Like, I just want to be done. No, I'm not a runner.
Oh, I tried. You hear it here, folks. I tried.
He tried.
1,000 miles, Nick.
No.
But I really do. I love that idea because like that anybody can use that in their business in any industry that they're in. For instance, we have guests that are in the mortgage industry or guests that are in the insurance industry, and they have goals. And for them of wanting to, in their business, utilize that, why not go the extra mile? let's double that and
Yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah.
And then when you hit that, minimal goal of 500, you're already halfway there that you can keep
Yeah.
going. So that's absolutely
Yeah,
fantastic.
so even when you fail, you met your previous goals.
Mm-hmm.
And just, like I said, incremental growth.
Yeah.
I look at it as every single day, 5 miles a day. That's what I have to do in order to get through it.
Yeah.
And, as you said, every other business, just if you set your individual daily goals and keep track of them that way and just making sure that just today I'm going to focus on that one goal and knock that one goal out, you carry that all the way 365 days a year, you put yourself in a better position.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, for coming on here. We will put your contact information in the show notes if people want to reach out. And like we mentioned, if you or somebody is going through something, please do not hesitate to reach out to somebody. There's no shame in that. There's no stigma in that. They're not a terrible person or they're not broken or messed up. We all need help. And we have all been in that place. And so please, if you're in that situation or know someone, please reach out. But again, thank you so much for joining us. For those listening, please rate, review, subscribe. We hate saying it, but those things help the algorithms and help more people hear this. 5-star reviews, all the 1-star reviews can go to Dustin at GarnerChamber.com. And we will talk to you guys in a few weeks. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
So I bought a acoustic guitar off Amazon, and turns out that was a junior guitar for young kids. Yeah, I did not get an adult guitar. I didn't know there was such thing. It fit me, and then I'm pretty
That was
certain.
the funniest part.